Hello and welcome to today's session. I'm Asmita, your IELTS mentor here at Vedantu, and I know you're a bit anxious because this day is coming up. Soon you're going to be taking the IELTS test and you're going to be sitting across from an examiner who's going to be assessing your speaking skills. So when you change a normal situation into an examination or an assessment, it automatically becomes harder. So you might have good conversational English, but when you know you're being judged for it, when you know that every word, every sentence that you're saying is being assessed by someone, you will fumble a bit here and there, you will forget basic English grammar, and you won't be able to find the right word for whatever you're trying to say. That's normal, that's human behavior, which is why we are going to prep in advance. If you know exactly what's going to happen on this day, you're going to be less nervous, less anxious, and the test is going to go smoothly for you. All right, so before we get started, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the updates, because now we're going to have serious, proper IELTS academic classes where I'm going to take you through every part of the test and we're going to study every part in detail. We're going to figure out the best way to prepare for it. I'm going to take you through every step of the way and we're going to practice together. So I don't want you to miss out on these really helpful sessions. So don't forget to subscribe and follow us on our Telegram channel. All right, so today the agenda is quite simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first help you understand the entire speaking test. Now, the IELTS speaking test is divided into three parts. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, obviously, right? And our focus today is going to be Part 1, where we're going to go through the Part 1 questions. We're going to come up with the best strategy to answer these questions. I'm going to take you through the common topics and I'm going to answer these questions in front of you as one would in an actual IELTS test, so you can understand what your thought process should be like and what kind of starters you can use to answer these questions, okay? So the focus of today's session is going to be entirely on Part 1, but before we get there, we do need to understand the IELTS speaking test completely, and we really need to understand the criteria on which we're being judged or assessed, which I'm going to take you through very shortly, right? And a basic understanding of the entire speaking test is necessary. So let me take you through that very quickly. You have three parts, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. Part 1 should last around 4 to 5 minutes. Part 2, I would say 3 minutes. And Part 3 again, 4 to 5 minutes. So Part 1 is a general introduction where first the examiner is going to ask for your basic details, your name, and yes, they do have to verify if you're the person on the form, but you also start getting scored right off the bat. So even when they ask for your name and where you're from, etc., think of that as the starting point of your IELTS speaking test, okay? So first they're going to ask you for general information like your name and stuff, and then they're going to move on to some very generic questions, okay? Very generic questions, which I will take you through. Once that is done, Part 2 is where you get a cue card with a topic on it. Then you get 1 minute to prepare what you're going to say about the topic, and then you're going to speak about that topic for 1 to 2 minutes. All right? Now, this is the longer part of the speaking test because you have to speak for longer and it's not a conversation. So it's just you who's talking. Then we have part 3 where you get follow-up questions based on the topic you got in your cue card. And this follow-up is like a discussion, and the examiner can ask questions based on what level they think you're at. So if they think you're doing well and you're an advanced English speaker, they can ask you more difficult questions to assess you better. Okay, so this is what the speaking test looks like. The entire ordeal lasts for about 11 minutes. Okay, not that long. So how do examiners score you? Now I'll take you through the official scoring guide shortly, but what we need to understand is there are basically 4 things that they're looking at, and these are the 4 things that we need to work on, right? So the first thing is your fluency and coherence. The second thing is your lexical resource, which we've talked about before as well. Next is grammatical range and accuracy. And lastly, you have good old pronunciation. Okay? So broadly, these are the 4 things that they're looking at. If you want to understand them better, then in fluency and coherence, they're seeing whether you hesitate. Whoops, yes. They're seeing whether you hesitate. Why? Okay, yes. Okay, so it's refusing to change color, so we're just going to go with yellow. Okay, they're seeing if you hesitate when you speak, okay, and you can hesitate when it comes to thinking about what you're going to say next, but you shouldn't hesitate because you're unable to come up with the right vocabulary, or if you're unable to frame your sentences properly. So the hesitation should be more about, okay, what am I going to say next? What do I think about this topic? What are my thoughts and opinions? And not, okay, how do I frame this sentence? If what I'm saying is grammatically correct or not? Wait, what's the right word for that? Okay, so very specific kind of hesitation is permitted. And fluency and coherence basically means how comfortable you are coming up with sentences in a flow. So if you had to prepare in advance, especially for your part 2 section, then obviously you've thought about what you want to say, you have the points noted down, you know how the monologue essentially is going to go, right? But when it comes to conversation, you cannot predict what the examiner is going to ask you next. So to immediately be able to communicate your thoughts, that's what they're testing in fluency and coherence. Another thing with coherence is sometimes we just get lost in our train of thought, and we come up with very random bursts of unconnected information because we're just thinking so fast and thinking about so many different things that we blurt them out, but we're unable to connect them together. So what you're saying needs to be coherent, it needs to make sense, it needs to be a logical unit. And this is where your connectors, your linking words, your conjunctions really come into play, because they help you connect your different thoughts and help you take your listener along the same path that you're traveling, right? Next, you have your lexical resource, which again, like I've told you, is vocabulary. So your range of vocabulary, if you know the right word for the right thing, if you're able to express the same thought with two or three different words. That's what they're looking at over here. Next, grammatical range and accuracy. Again, if you're able to switch tenses, if you're asked about past memory, are you able to switch between your simple past tense, your past perfect, maybe your past perfect continuous, all those things, right? And you don't have to get very technical when you're preparing for this. It's fine if you don't remember the different names for the tenses. As long as you're using them correctly, it's fine. And grammar can be intuitive for someone who spends a lot of time with the language. So if, like I've advised you to, if you're listening to podcasts in English, if you're watching shows, you will automatically pick up on these grammatical structures without having to sit down and study what is what. You don't even have to know what a verb is or what an adverb is to use it correctly. So instead of spending time trying to learn grammar and all its technicalities, what you should be doing is just listening to how people talk and automatically pick up on these grammatical patterns, right? Next, accuracy. Like I've told you, some grammar errors are okay, especially the kind that native speakers make. They're not going to hurt your score too much, but a lot of errors, if your error density is too high and it reflects that you're really not comfortable with the language, yes, it's going to hurt your score, okay? And lastly, pronunciation. Here again, accent is really not a concern as long as you're communicating clearly and the words that you're saying can be understood. And I've talked about this before. Instead of focusing on changing your accent, try to focus more on enunciation, the way you articulate, and syllable stress. So as long as you follow the widely accepted syllable stress patterns in the British or American, Australian accent, wherever it is that you're going, and as long as you take your time pronouncing each word. So what generally happens with Indians is we either don't say the last part of the word, we just kind of mumble towards the end, or we speak too fast. And I'll just give you a good hack that really works when it comes to pronunciation, is that just stress on your T's, because if you've ever paid attention, you can take a look at, you know, Bollywood celebrities giving interviews and stuff. When they talk, what sets, I would say, Aishwarya Rai apart from others is that she really takes her time to enunciate, to say all her words properly. And she stresses on her T's, which is why she sounds eloquent and everything she says is clearly understandable. What are you doing? What are you doing? That's generally how we talk to our friends and everybody else. Like, so instead of saying, what are you doing? Instead of ending that what with a d sound, what are you doing? You can say, what are you doing? What you doing? And if you make it colloquial, that's even better, because we are trying to sound like native speakers. So what you doing is even better than what are you doing. But what are you doing? Definitely better than what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Right? So you hear that difference? That's all you need to take care of. Okay? Now, here's the official scoring guide, and you can search IELTS Speaking band descriptors. Okay, you can just search IELTS Speaking band descriptors and you'll find whatever I'm showing you here. Okay, you can just read it, because I'm just showing you the descriptor for band 9, 8 and 7, but you can also see it for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as well, right? And this is what every examiner follows to the T, right? So when they're assessing you, they take a look at this exact piece of paper or slide and they go by this word for word, okay? So we should know what the different things are that they're looking at. And for that, let me just zoom in. Let's start with fluency and coherence. If you want a band 9 in your IELTS speaking test, when it comes to fluency and coherence, first thing it says is you need to be fluent with only very occasional repetition or self-correction. So it's good actually to correct yourself if you've made an error, because it shows that, okay, you made a mistake, but you've caught it. So you know what the right thing is. So self-correction is fine, but it shouldn't happen in every other sentence, because that impedes communication, that gets in the way, right? So fluency means you are not repeating yourself too much and you are correcting yourself but not too much. Like I said, if you've made a mistake, better to correct yourself than to let it go. Okay? Next thing is, any hesitation that occurs is used only to prepare the content of the next utterance and not to find words or grammar. This I've already explained to you, right? And you can really tell because, and generally the kind of fillers we use are very indicative of what's going on in our head. So if you've watched any show, there's this one show, I don't know if you all have watched it. It was like a British show which is called Mind Your Language, which was racist in many ways, stereotyped many different cultures. But it was just basically a group of people in an English class trying to learn English from all over the world, okay? Immigrants from all over the place. And a lot of them had catchphrases that was very indicative of where they stand in terms of their language acquisition and how well they know English. And so you might notice that a lot of people, when they don't know the exact word for something or when they can't find the right grammar, they end up saying things like, wait, how do you say it? Wait, what do you say? What do you call? You know, so these kind of fillers, be wary of them. They shouldn't seep in. And it should be very obvious that when you're hesitating or when you're taking your time, because while talking, you are going to pause. You're not AI. You're not a robot. You're not just going to splurt out information without thinking, right? You're going to take your time. Even AI takes its time, right? So that's how the brain works. It's going to think about what it wants to say next. So your hesitation should be obviously about content and not about finding the right words or the right grammar, okay? Next is, speech is situationally appropriate and cohesive. Sorry, one second. And cohesive features are fully acceptable, okay? So whatever you're talking about, the kind of words that you're using, or what the kind of answer that you're giving has to apply to the question. So just because you think it's a language test, it doesn't matter what I say as long as I'm saying it right. That's not entirely true. You need to answer appropriately, answer the question that's being asked. Don't go off on a tangent. Your answer needs to precisely answer the question. You can add details to furnish your answer a bit, but it should directly answer your question. And next topic, development is fully coherent and appropriately extended. So whenever you're asked a question, don't be very curt in your replies. Don't think, okay, you know what, I'm going to be smart about this. I'll just say yes or no, or I'll just give one word answers. Again, be intelligent, okay? It is a language test. Doesn't mean you have to go off on tangents, but you do need to showcase your language abilities, right? You need to show the examiner that you know words, you know grammar, you know English. So whenever you're developing a topic, be it, you know, something as generic as what's your apartment like, and when you're answering that question, just don't use two adjectives and think that you've given a good answer. It's cozy and clean and you think that's a good answer. No, don't stop there. Develop your answer properly, give related information, and use at least 2 or 3 sentences to answer each question, okay? Especially in part 1. When it comes to part 3, you will have to give long answers. We'll get to that later. Right now, I'm only hyper-focusing on part 1, okay? So that's fluency and coherence. Lexical resource says total flexibility and precise use in all contexts, sustained use of accurate and idiomatic language. So here again, you are able to use a word properly, appropriately in the given context. There are words that have multiple meanings, and sometimes when we're just randomly mugging up synonyms, which you might think is a great way to prepare for the IELTS, because a lot of our Indian government exams actually expect you to mug up vocabulary, which is so bizarre in my opinion. So you think, okay, I'm just gonna make my vocabulary better and I'm just gonna sit and memorize words, I'm gonna sit and memorize their synonyms without actually going in depth and understanding how even synonyms have different usage, because nuance is a big thing in the English language, right? Even if you have a synonym, it's still slightly different and expresses a slightly different emotion. So knowing which word to use for which context is very important. It shows that you truly understand the nuances of the English language. And sustained use of accurate and idiomatic language. So if you use idiomatic language, if you're using phrases that native speakers generally use, and there are differences here. Britishers have different idiomatic expressions, Americans have different, Australians I'm not even aware of because I haven't been around enough Australians, but all of them have their different idiomatic expressions. It doesn't matter. It won't really hurt your score if you are, let's say, using American spelling instead of British spelling, or using an American phrase instead of a British phrase, as long as it exists in the English language, as long as a native English speaker from one of these English speaking countries uses that phrase, it's fine. Okay. So, and this is why you can't find a guide that explains all of this. You can't really just look at a list and be like, okay, I'll just memorize this. That's not how this works. You won't be able to talk like a native. You're just going to sound fake. And memorized answers, obviously memorized answers are going to get you a bad score, because the examiner can easily tell that this is a common memorized answer. They've just mugged it up and they're just regurgitating this in front of me. They're not going to be impressed. Okay. So whatever you're saying has to be yours. And even though we are preparing in advance, that doesn't mean you're just going to sit and memorize answers for each topic. That's a waste of your time. That's not going to help you in the long run, because it's not just about the IELTS. You do need to learn English if you want to do well in any of these countries. And just work towards that goal. IELTS is a part of it, a very important part of it, yes. But ultimately, you want your English to get better, right? So that is why don't mug up random lists. Just focus on listening, and then speaking. So listening always comes first, and then you speak. You're going to spend a lot of time listening to content in English, and then you're going to practice speaking, okay? Then when it comes to grammatical range and accuracy, structures are precise and accurate at all times. Apart from mistakes, characteristic of native speaker speech. Said this many times. See, it's written in the official banned descriptor. Okay. You can make mistakes. You can mess up a preposition here or there. You can use the wrong conjunction once in a while. You can miss out on subject-verb agreement rules. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be native speaker-like. Okay. So even if you make grammatical errors, you can still get a band 9. Next, pronunciation uses a full range of phonological features to convey precise and or subtle meaning. Flexible use of features of connected speech is sustained throughout, can be effortlessly understood throughout. Accent has no effect on intelligibility. So here, starting with the first one, when you're talking, you don't want to sound robotic. And this is why memorized answers can land you in trouble. They end up sounding robotic. You don't mean them. And if you listen to the way you yourself talk or anyone else talks, your intonation changes, your inflection changes, right? If you're excited about something, you're going to sound slightly different. If you're not so happy about something, your tone, your voice, the way you speak is going to change. It's going to be different. And that is a big part of language, especially when it comes to speaking. Okay? So they're going to look out for all of this. And if you're able to express the subtle meaning through the way you're talking. So it's one thing to know a word. It's another thing to use it correctly in the right context. And it's a whole other thing to be able to say it right. Okay. So you need to make sure that whenever you're learning a new word, you are going through all of these steps. Okay. Again, flexible use of features of connected speech is sustained throughout. So this kind of overlaps with coherence a bit, that everything you're saying needs to be sort of connected. Don't try to go for the really mad genius vibe here, you know, those quirky characters who are very intelligent but have no interpersonal communication skills, and then, you know, they're just probably solving really tough quantum mechanics questions in their head, but when it comes to talking, they're just very, I would say, cat-like. They don't form full sentences. Their answers are very abrupt. They kind of zone out in the middle. You get what I'm saying? The character sketch that I've just made for you. Don't aim for that in the IELTS. You need to be Oprah-like when it comes to the IELTS, okay? It's all about expression. It's all about use of language, and it's all about using it intelligently to show the examiner exactly what they want to see. That, look, I can use English. It's something I know. It's something that I have acquired completely, and I am going to be an asset for your country for that very reason, okay? So you need to show that through your pronunciation. You need to be understood, and accent has no effect, okay? Accent does not matter as long as you don't sound like that, okay? Whatever you're saying makes sense. Right? So I've already told you how to find this. I can leave a link in the description if you want. And you can just go through the score guide for all bands and kind of see, okay, where do I stand? Do I hesitate to think about words? Am I unable to express myself through my tone or intonation? Am I unable to think of the right word for the right situation? Figure out where you stand, and that'll give you a fair idea of which band you're at currently, even if you've never taken the IELTS, okay? And then work your way up from there. Mark the things that you need to work on and start working on them. That's the only way to go about this, okay? All right, so now we can dive deep into our part 1 topics, okay? Now, these are the common topics that you see in the IELTS test: work, study, hometown, accommodation, or you can just say home. Just change this to white. Your daily routine, your hobbies, habits, TV, movies that you've seen, documentaries, okay, books that you've read recently, food preferences, weather, basically all small talk stuff, okay? Travel, family, likes or dislikes. And because this is all small talk stuff, and I know generally nobody likes small talk, and you might not be very enthusiastic about these topics, they might seem very boring, and that can put you off. But if you think they're boring and if you're put off by these topics, chances are you're going to sound uninterested when you're answering these questions, and that's going to hurt your score. So you need to treat these topics like very interesting things that you care deeply about, okay? And just try and be enthusiastic when you're answering these questions, okay? So these are the general topics that you've seen. Now see, none of these, I would say, are anything that you're unfamiliar with. I'm sure you know, you have something to say about all of these, right? And even if you can get stuck somewhere, like probably here, you've never seen a documentary, or here because you've never read a book, okay, or here because you're very neutral about the weather, you don't care. There might be places where you don't care enough, but that's why we are prepping in advance, so that you can learn to care a little bit, so you have something to say and you're not caught off guard. Because you cannot, if your examiner, for example, asks you about a documentary that you've really watched, you can't be like, hey, why don't you ask me about a book instead? Or can we talk about movies? You can ask me about a Marvel movie I've recently watched because I care more about that. You cannot change the question. So you have to say something, and not answering is going to hurt your score. So if there are things here that you don't care about, start caring about them a little bit. You know, maybe 1 or 2 books, just look into them. I'm not saying you have to sit and read those books. Just look into them enough so that you can use them for an answer, okay? Or switch it around a little bit. Make it work for you. For example, if you're asked about a book, you can say, hey, I don't read a lot of novels, but I like self-help books, okay? Or you can say, I like Japanese comics, which are called mangas. Or you can just say, I like comic books, or I like anything that's illustrated, okay? So you can make it work for you. Similarly, when it comes to documentaries, just look up a few good ones. And if you want to watch them because they're in English, sure, go ahead, do that. If not, then feel free to just read the synopsis, the premise, understand what it's about, and just know enough about it to be able to answer a generic question, okay? So these are your topics. Now we're gonna start answering these questions, and I'm going to take you through how we're gonna answer them step by step. We have 2 sample answers here that we're gonna go through together, okay? And each topic has around 3 or 4 questions. I'm gonna take you through how to answer them, okay? Now, before we get started with this, few things that I want you to keep in mind. Number 1, so before this, before your examiner asks you these questions, I've already told you they're gonna ask you your name, they're gonna ask you where you're from, okay? And you have to answer those questions as well. And when you're answering those questions, don't give one-word short replies, okay? Try to build an answer around those questions as well, okay? That doesn't mean you have to say a paragraph just to answer your name, answer this question about your name. That's not necessary, but say at least 1 or 2 sentences, proper sentences, and right off the bat, you will not only get into the flow of answering, but you'll also leave a good impression on the examiner, okay? So once you've answered these generic questions, that's when we go into your actual questions for part 1. Now here's the first topic, which is work or study. So the question will generally be, do you work or are you a student? Do you work or do you study? Something along those lines. And because you're all preparing for IELTS Academic, and that means you're going to a different country to study, you are students, right? But you might also have a part-time job, or maybe you're doing something on the side. So you could be both. You could be working or studying, but what are you primarily? That's how you're going to answer this question, okay? So when we answer a question, what did I tell you? No one-word answers. In fact, no one-sentence answers either, okay? Answers have to be long. You're showcasing your verbal ability. You're showcasing how well you can communicate in English. So no one-word answers, no one-sentence answers, but no paragraphs in part 1 either, okay? So wait, okay, no one word, no one sentence, no paragraphs. Where is the sweet spot? What am I supposed to say? Okay, your sweet spot is, I would say, 4 sentences. Okay, not more than 4 sentences. 4 sentences should be enough to answer each question. Okay, you can even say 2 to 3 sentences. That's fine as well, but a maximum of 4 sentences depending upon the depth of the question. If you can say a little bit more, then feel free to do that, okay? So keeping this in mind, knowing our 2 to 3 or 4 sentence limit, how can we make the answer for this question a 4 sentence answer? Because if somebody asks you, do you work or are you a student? It's just easy to say, I am a student, right? And you can just end there, okay? But We don't want one sentence answers. We want longer answers. So where do we get that content from? This is all I can think of. Where do I go from here? What am I supposed to say next? Let me tell you. First, you can have a good starter, okay? And a good starter would be something like at the moment or currently, because you're talking about your current situation. What are you right now? At the moment, I am a student, and then, student where? So obviously, what is, okay, you've said you're a student. Where does that lead you? Where do you study, right? So you can simply mention I'm a student at da 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 da, and you can go as far as to say studying what, okay? So you can use a good starter at the moment, currently, right now, okay? All of these work, and then answer the question directly and give a little bit of extra information. So if you're asked, do you work or are you a student? Then you can say, I am currently a student at Delhi University. So number one, starter. Number two, direct answer. And number three, where. And number four, what. Okay, following this pattern, now we can come up with different answers. So I can say, okay, right now, currently, or at the moment, I am a student at Delhi University. I go to Sri Ram College of Commerce and I'm doing my bachelor's in commerce from there. That's it, right? So you've answered the question, 2 or 3 sentences. We've actually gone beyond. We've given 4 sentences, but it didn't take that long. It's a good enough answer, giving good enough information, okay? Next, what do you like about your studies? Now, here's a question that does have depth because you're supposed to give your opinion. So we can say this is an opinion-based question. It's not factual. Okay, so here you can make use of good adverbs because you're asked, what do you like about your studies? So obviously your answer is going to revolve around the things you like. But there are some things that you like a lot more than other things, right? So you can make good use of adverbs here to expand on your answer. You can extend your answer a little bit by talking about things that you especially like, that you like a lot, that you're really, really excited about. And you can use a few different adverbs to talk about things that you generally are okay with, right? So what do you like about your studies? Here we've already narrowed down on what we're studying. You might get another question which asks you about your particular discipline. You could get a question that directly asks, what are you studying? Okay, so even if you've mentioned it already, it's fine. You can just talk about it again. And then, what do you like about your studies? Again, we can have a good starter. Just follow the same. So, what I really like, or the thing that I like the most, okay? Or one thing I particularly. So there's no end to these starters, and these are just starters that I'm coming up with off the top of my head, right? So there are many more, and you can come up with these yourself when you are preparing for the IELTS, right? And we're going to have more sessions where I'll give you many generic starters that you can use, like flashcards in a flashcard format, so you can, it's okay to memorize these. You can memorize these, but make sure you're making them a part of your speech and they don't sound odd. You say this and then the rest of the sentence is just grammatically incorrect, that's not going to work, right? So yeah, one thing I particularly like, okay, so here we've given a starter, and then obviously what I really like about, the thing that I like the most about, one thing I particularly like about, and then you have to narrow down on what you're studying, right? So about my course, or if you're studying psychology, about psychology, if you're studying marketing, about marketing, right? So you specify what it is that you're studying. So if we were to go with psychology, I would say something like, what I really like about psychology is the kind of insight it gives you into your own mind. Okay, so now I've just picked out something that I find interesting about the subject, and obviously you're studying or planning to study. So you can just come up with one thing that you really I hope you like what you're studying, because it's going to be sad and depressing if you don't like what you're studying. Even if you're doing engineering, let's say you're doing engineering. So what I really like about engineering is the power that it gives you to actually help mankind. Okay, so the fact that you can create, you can come up with technology that can possibly change the world is very fascinating, right? So something along those lines. Figure out one thing that you like about your subject, talk about it, and then to extend your answer a little bit, you can also talk about something that you don't like as much, but you also like. So one thing I particularly like or love about psychology is the insight it gives you into your own mind. I also like that you can use that insight to actually help people. Okay, so you've said enough about this and answered the question in 3 to 4 sentences. You can make it longer if you please. So one thing I particularly like about psychology is the insight it gives you into your own mind. But now here, another sample that I'm giving you, the contradiction. So you say something you like, you add a but, and you give the counter side of that, not explicitly, not to say that, okay, this is good, this is bad, but just as a natural offshoot of whatever you're saying, right? So you say, one thing I particularly like about psychology is the insight it gives you into your own mind. But you also need to be careful not to judge yourself too harshly and not to do a lot of self-diagnosis, which is a common trap that a lot of psychology students fall into. Apart from that, psychology is just extremely fascinating, and I love uncovering the many layers of the human mind. Okay, so you've said what you wanted to say, given a little bit of a caveat, a contradiction, and then you've come back to what you liked about it. Okay, so these are the different ways in which you can answer this question. Then you're asked, is there anything you dislike about it? Now you can expand on what you dislike. Now the dislike can be about the subject itself. It can be something to do with how the curriculum in your particular college is set. Okay, it could be something about the way the coursework is, or how frequently the tests or exams take place. So the dislike could be about any of these things. Figure out what you don't like and then talk about it. And here it would really help, because you've already spoken about the things you like about it and you've clearly stated that you really like the subject that you're studying. To have a strong dislike here would be quite conflicting. It would be weird and unnatural. So over here, starting with a conjunction, a dependent clause that shows a little bit of switch, like although, even though, okay, while. So conjunctions like these, okay? And then you can say, although I love the subject itself, I don't really like the way our curriculum has been designed. Okay, so you've stated your dislike. You've said, although I love the subject itself, I just don't like the way the curriculum has been designed, or I just don't like the way the coursework has been designed. Uh, then once you've stated your dislike, what do you do next? So here the first step would be, again, your starter. Now blue decides to show up. Great, okay. You have your starter, okay, and then state your dislike. Why? Talk about why you dislike it, okay. So your starter, you'll always have a good starter, then answer the question directly, then expand on it, okay. So is there anything you dislike about it? Although I love psychology as a subject, I really dislike the way the curriculum at our college has been designed. It focuses too much on rote memorization and just reading theories, and we have constant tests on those theories, and we hardly get a chance to actually practically use what we are learning. Okay, so now you've given a reason why you don't like the way your curriculum has been designed, because it focuses too much on memorization and doesn't give you enough space or scope to actually practice practically everything that you've learned. Okay, so even though I love psychology as a subject, the way the coursework has been designed makes it boring sometimes. This is another way you can answer this, you know. And if you want to change the subject to see another sample answer, then we can say, you know, even though I love the idea of marketing, I don't like the way we are taught the subject, because we don't get a lot of chance to put whatever we've learned into action. Okay, so whatever it is, you might be studying something that you don't like. Maybe you're applying to a university in your second year, and maybe you're changing your major because you don't like what you're studying, right? So here, if you have spoken about this properly, there's not much that I like about my subject. If that was your answer at this point, then you can talk about disliking your subject at this point. That's also completely fine. So here, let's try taking a different route. Maybe you got stuck with I don't know, computer engineering, but you wanted to do mechanical or aerospace engineering. Let's say that. Okay, so then what do you like about your studies? You can say, although I like engineering as a whole, I can't say I'm a huge fan of computer engineering. The whole reason why I wanted to get into engineering in the first place was so I could build things. And in my head, the idea of building is putting large pieces together and creating something that can be used as soon as I've built it. And that doesn't exactly translate well when you are coding, because you don't get to see the end result right away. Okay, so you can kind of go into what you like about engineering as a whole, but why you don't like your field of engineering and you would much rather do something else like aerospace or mechanical. Okay, you can talk about something like that. And then over here, is there anything you dislike about it? The examiner will probably change the question to, what is it that you dislike about, you know, computer engineering as opposed to mechanical? So then you can just build upon. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm unable to translate the language of code into what the outcome is supposed to be. My brain has a hard time imagining that, and so I'm not able to apply myself properly when it comes to computer engineering. So whatever it is that you don't like, you speak about that. Okay, so this is a different approach that we've taken to answer this question. And here again, if you are genuine, it will be easier for you to answer these questions. Right now, I'm just making random things up and giving you sample answers, but you will already know what it is that you're studying. You will already know what you like about it. You'll already know what you don't like about it. So you can very easily answer these questions. Okay. Next. Okay, so that was the end. No, same sample answer one. Okay. Would you like to change your field of study in the future? Okay. Now here, first decide Are you going to say yes? Are you going to say no? Or are you going to be in that maybe zone? And instead of taking a strong stance for a question like this, I think it kind of helps being in the maybe zone. Because what you can say is, if you talked about how much you liked the subject here, for example, if we go ahead with psychology, I would say something like, I haven't really thought about this because I love the subject that I'm studying a lot. But now that I'm thinking about this, it would make sense to broaden my scope. So maybe I would study something related to my field in the future, but not change my field completely. Okay, something along those lines. If you're completely unhappy with what you're studying, then yes, I actually would like to change my field of study and go into something or study something that I truly want to. Because maybe, okay, so maybe what has happened with you is you've chosen a subject that your parents wanted you to choose, and you have openly spoken about that a little bit. Now, don't go into trauma and don't start explaining societal problems in the IELTS test. But you can casually mention the fact that, I didn't think about it hard enough when I was choosing this as my major. And I think I was under a little bit of pressure from my parents, which is why I chose, I don't know, let's say engineering. And now that I've started studying it, I don't think I'm that interested in it, to be honest. You can say something like this. And then when you reach this question, when your examiner asks you if you would like to change your field of study in the future, you can say something along the lines of, absolutely, I've learned a lot of important skills from engineering, and I can surely apply those to do something that I am genuinely interested in. I wouldn't see my years of studying engineering as a waste because it's given me important life skills, but I would definitely like to choose another subject for a career. So you can say something like this and say, yes, I would like to change my field. You can say a hard no, I don't want to change my field, but it's always better to concede a little bit, say something along the lines of, I would love to explore what's out there, and if something piques my interest, then sure, I would like to look into it as well. Okay? All right, so this was a very detailed how you can think about answering these questions, kind of starters that you need to have, how you can frame your thoughts logically, how to extend your answers a little bit so they showcase your speaking ability. Now we're just going to straight up answer these questions, okay, without going through that entire dissection process, okay? Now this is, as you can see, daily routine question. What is a typical day like for you? So a typical day for me starts at around 7 a.m. I wake up, freshen up. I like to get in a little bit of exercise in the morning, have a good nutritious meal, and then get ready for my day. I go to work, spend majority of my time there, and then get back home at around 8 p.m., after which is my unwinding time. So I just grab my dinner, sit on the couch, watch a good movie, watch some television, and then get ready for the night. Okay, so I've just explained what a typical day looks like for me. Now your day might not look like that, obviously, because you're students and you spend majority of your day studying or going to college. So you can describe that as well. So you can say, typically I wake up at around 6 a.m. and the first thing I like doing is studying. I find that I can concentrate much better in the morning. So I get my studying done. Then I go to college, get back at around 4 p.m., do my assignments, catch up with friends, and then spend the rest of the evening just chilling with my dog and getting ready for the night. Okay, so now you've just described your typical day in, obviously you haven't gone into a lot of detail, you haven't specified everything, but you've given a very rough summary of everything you do throughout the day. Next, do you prefer mornings or evenings? Now, this is a preference question. And whenever you have a preference question, don't be stuck in between, I can't decide, I'm both, no, I can't choose one, that's not possible for me. It just always depends. Don't fall into that trap where you can't make up your mind. Just pick one and go with it. So I am not a morning person at all, but I'm going to go with morning and I'm going to give you a sample answer. So, do you prefer mornings or evenings? I would say that I really prefer mornings because I just feel a lot more energetic at that time. I can do a lot of things in the morning like exercise, study, meditate, which would be impossible for me to do in the evenings. Okay, so you've just explained why you like mornings more. Now, if you want to explain why you like evenings more, you could just say something like, I've tried my best to be a morning person because everyone has asked me to, but I just find that I work my best in the evenings. I'm a lot more active, I can apply my brain better, and I just feel more creative and productive in the evenings, which is why I've just stuck to being an evening person. Okay, so that's your answer for why you prefer evenings. Next, do you follow the same routine every day? Now, here you can just show a little bit of your failings as a human being. That's completely fine. You could say something like, as much as I would like to follow a routine, my life is just all over the place these days and I am unable to. So my days are very random. I can't even plan ahead one day in advance. You could say something like this, where you're just conceding, you're saying that, yes, I am a mess and that's okay. Or you can be like, I've read a lot about how having a routine makes you more productive, and I've started applying that in my life. And for the past 3 months, I've been strictly following a routine, and I found it to be extremely helpful. I've gotten a lot of things done that I was procrastinating on for years now. So I definitely advocate following a routine and do that myself. Okay. So, yes, do you follow the same routine every day? Yes, I follow the same routine. No, I don't follow the same routine. I try to follow the same routine, but I am not able to. Any of those answers work as long as you're just able to expand on why following a routine works for you, why it doesn't work for you, why you want it to work for you, but you're not able to follow a routine. Okay? Now, tips for part 1. How are you going to answer these questions? Whatever I've told you, I'm just going to summarize that. Number 1, no yes, no answers, no one sentence answers, and no paragraphs or speeches either. Okay? What do you want? You want around 4 sentences. You're gonna have a good starter followed by a direct answer, followed by a reason for your answer. Okay, then sometimes if you cannot think of ways to extend your answer, sometimes contradicting yourself can help. Okay, so when you can't think of more to say, try to say the opposite of what you've said in a way that makes sense. Like, what is your favorite food? I love Indian food, but sometimes I just get sick of it because I eat it too much, and that's when I crave pastas and pizzas. Okay, so something like that. And then how to extend answers. Again, we've talked about this. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to have good starters, like usually I do this, currently doing that, even though I'd like to blah blah blah, I blah blah blah. One thing I at the moment, all these starters that we discussed, I will come up with a list of generic starters for every topic for you, okay? Very shortly. Once we're done with all parts of the speaking portion, I'm going to give you generic starters. I'm going to give you all of this that you can use to prepare, okay? So having starters really helps extend your answer. Giving reasons will help extend your answers. Giving contradictions sometimes will help you extend your answers. And if you absolutely run out of things that you want to say and you're just stuck, you can do something like flip your answer. So you can just say, Do you prefer mornings or evenings? I am a morning person. Then you can't think of what you want to say next. So you can say, I am a morning person, but now that I think of it, I have been spending my evenings doing majority of my work, and I've been sleeping in a lot lately, and that hasn't really affected me negatively. So I think I am currently transitioning into an evening person, right? So you started with something else, you ran out of things to say, you flipped your stance, and you were able to justify that flip, okay? So these are ways in which you can extend your answers. You can also add proper conjunctions, linking words, right? Linking words and conjunctions will help you, like linking words like additionally, right? If you want to talk about something and then you want to add to the point, additionally, this is also something. What I love about marketing is that the kind of impact it has on human psychology. Additionally, it also really affects our behavior as a social group. So you've talked about something very specific to your subject, and you've just used a linking word to sort of add to your answer, right? So these are some ways that are useful to extend your answers, but then you don't really have to sit and figure out ways to do all of these, because once you become comfortable with conversational English, you won't have to think about these things. All of these things will happen automatically in your head. Okay, so number one step is to always just practice speaking in English. So think about it like try to do a push-up. You can't do a push-up on day one. You have to start slow. You would probably start with knee push-ups. Maybe you'll do incline push-ups. Maybe you can't even do incline or knee push-ups. You're that level of beginner that you maybe have to do wall push-ups. That's fine, but that's how you'll progress. If you don't start the wall push-ups, you can't get to the actual push-up, and your IELTS is that actual push-up, okay? So even if you're not able to say one full sentence in English, you have to start trying. Mess it up, make mistakes, figure out where you're going wrong, and then start all over again. Keep doing it, and you won't even realize when you start doing full English push-ups, okay? So those were my tips for part one. Here's some practice for you. Now this is all related to the topic food. What kind of food do you like? Do you prefer eating at home or eating out? Have your food preferences changed over the years? What are some traditional foods in your country? Do you have a healthy diet? Now I'm going to help you out a little bit. I'm just not going to throw you in the jungle. I will help you navigate the jungle a little bit. What kind of food do you like? State your normal preference. I love Indian food, like I said, but because I eat so much of it, I sometimes get really bored or sick of it, and that's when I fall back to my pastas and pizzas and burgers, okay? Do you prefer eating at home or eating out? Again, it's a preference question, so state your preference first and then expand on it, okay? I prefer eating at home because it's cost effective and healthier. Now, contradiction. But the reality is that I get so tired by the end of the day that I mostly end up ordering in or eating out, okay? So to extend my answer, I stated my preference, but then I spoke about my reality. Have your food preferences changed over the years? Yes, because I moved from one country to another. I got used to the cuisine of whichever country I've moved to. This is one approach to this answer. You can say, no, my food preferences have not changed because I generally cook myself, and there are some things that I know I can make well and fast, so I stick to making those meals, okay? Now, I'm giving you a sample answer so that you know how to think about answering these questions. Doesn't mean your answer has to be along the same lines as mine. It can be a different answer. Just make sure you hit all the notes, you cover all the parts of the answer. What are some traditional foods in your country? This we can all easily explain, whichever region of India you're from. I'm sure you have a lot of traditional foods that you can talk on and on about. If I was to answer this question, I probably not know what to say, because what is traditional Punjabi food? Like, Rajma chawal, I don't know. I don't know what traditional Punjabi food is. Now, do you have a healthy diet? Be honest, laugh at yourself, it's fine. You can say, yes, I have a fairly healthy diet. I cook most of my meals at home and I make sure they're nutritionally rich. I add enough protein to my meals. Or you can say, no, I do not have a healthy diet because I mostly order out. So here, you've linked the answer to this question to this question, which can happen when you're answering questions about the same topic. Okay, so I've helped you out a little bit. I'm sure you can figure this out. Do practice. What I want you to do is record yourself. Record yourself while answering these questions. Okay, another thing that you can do is practice with ChatGPT. I'll tell you more about how you can do this, but don't trust ChatGPT's feedback. Don't ask ChatGPT to give you a band and then if it randomly gives you like a band 6, don't be demotivated, right? What you can do with ChatGPT is do real-time practice. So you can give all these prompts to ChatGPT and you can just ask ChatGPT to ask you these questions one by one and wait for you to answer them, okay? So, but I would definitely recommend recording yourself so that later when you've practiced, when you've actually followed some of my advice and you see how much better you've gotten, you will have something to compare it to. Like you can actually compare how much better you've gotten, okay? So do that and I will see you next time. If you haven't filled out this counseling form yet, please do so. You're going to get expert guidance. They're going to help you out with everything end to end, how to apply, whom to contact, how to visa, how to everything they're going to take care of, okay? And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Telegram. Take good care of yourselves. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.